So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. Well, I'm super excited because my guest today is the super talented Jack Ryder. Jack, how are you? Welcome.
I'm very good, thank you. I'm already admiring your DVD collection. Yeah.
Do you know what? I love to have DVDs. I'm very much a kind of a I like a physical thing as opposed to a something in the air. So yeah, DVDs, they're going to last forever in my opinion.
They are, they are. And it's all I spent my money on when I was a young actor in EastEnders. All I did was go to HMV every weekend, just buy mountains of films and box sets. And yeah, it's great. Love it.
I, I was going to say, and obviously, there's a lot to talk about with you because you've done so much. But I wanted to start off with kind of what you've been doing more recently, and you've been doing a lot of acting coaching for people that are obviously coming up in the industry. How did you
Mhm.
get into that? Because I mean, it must be such a nice thing to be able to give back what you've learned over the years. So how did that come about for you?
It kind of what propelled it was COVID, in all honesty. When everything was shut down and I was about to become a dad for the first time, and it was quite a precarious time. And I was kind of thinking like I've got to get something going. I've got to get a job or I've got to whatever because acting and theatre and all that stuff had just been was totally closed off. And what I had done previous to that in sort of drips and drabs is sort of doing master classes at sort of drama schools of screen acting and working with students. I directed for a decade and I loved working with actors and as a director. And I found that I don't know, in the directing capacity, I found that I could just sort of very quickly just get to the point and communicate with actors and get them to fulfill something. I'm sort of, I don't know, I was just sort of good with people in that way of just sort of nurturing and guiding and all that sort of stuff. And I seem to allow them to sort of work it through artistically and the execution was kind of on point with all that stuff. So I kind of, yeah, it just sort of started that way, and I just thought, well, what if I can, self-taping and all that was kicking off, and Zoom and all this stuff, and I just thought, what if I can devise something where I can sort of reach out to people who, you know, want to fulfill their desire to be in the business and work on the craft and it just sort of snowballed like that, really. And yeah, it's been the last 5 years, and it's now I've got clients here and in America and in Italy and India and and all from different walks of life. Most 80% of my client base is are working actors in the industry, actors with agents and sort of spotlight profiles and all that sort of stuff. And it's been really enjoyable. It's very fulfilling and it's become a real vocation. Yeah.
I mean, when you were kind of starting out in the industry, did you have anything like that? Did you have kind of people that were very supportive and that kind of coached you?
No, well, this is the thing. I never had any sort of mentorship in that way because I got plucked from nothing. I was spotted by a producer in an open workshop, and my career just was plucked out of the darkness. So I never went to drama school. I never had any necessarily desire to be an actor. I played football when I was a kid and watched movies, So I loved films and I loved cartoons and things and comedies but the idea of becoming an actor wasn't even on my radar. So yeah, I never had that experience of sort of even getting to that point where I was going to make a choice in that. I did want to sort of study drama in college, and that was the idea, but the EastEnders thing whipped me up into the air before any of that could happen. So, but yeah, it was definitely not on my radar growing up at all. No.
So, I mean, having said that, do you remember when you realized that that was something you wanted to explore, whether it be long term or just see if you were
Mhm.
interested? Do you remember kind of where that happened?
I think it was always in the back of my mind, that kind of whisper that I couldn't really hear very well. But I know the moment when it sort of switched to me going, actually, I kind of want to maybe pursue this. And that was when I went to see Titanic at the cinema. Yeah. And my sister, who at that time, so what was I? I must have been 15, 16. She would have been 13. She was a big DiCaprio fan. I knew nothing of this guy, but she had all these posters from Romeo and Juliet. She loved the film Romeo and Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann film. And he's a handsome guy, he's very, great. And we went to see this Titanic film, and I was like, oh, it's going to be some like period drama, and this DiCaprio, and my sister's going to be all gooey in the chair next to me, and so I was really going in with no real expectations, and I was completely, as everyone was, blown away by just the cinematic experience of that, and not only the acting and the performances, but the score and the set design and just every part of it. I was just like, and I think that's what made me go, you know what, like this is something I might want to explore.
Obviously, EastEnders is kind of the moment that I imagine changed your life. I mean,
Mhm.
how did that? You said you obviously were sort of picked out at a casting event, but how did that come about? And were you a fan of the show beforehand?
I knew of the show. My mum, we had Neighbours, Brookside and Coronation Street on in my house when I was a kid. We didn't have EastEnders on. Not that we were against it or anything, but it just wasn't my mum's sort of vibe. But I was aware of it. I was aware of Barbara Windsor. I was aware of the Mitchell brothers and all that sort of stuff. Little did I know that was the family I was going to be moving into. Um, but it was a friend of mine who rang me. This is a true story. Who rang me up and said, "I'm going to this workshop in London at the near the Trocadero. Do you want to come with me?" And I was like, and he was like, "Come on, it's near the Trocadero. There's the arcades. We can, grab a McDonald's and we'll make a day of it." And I think he was just a bit insecure and nervous, and he just wanted a bit of company. And I went, "Yeah, let's go and do it. Let's go and have a day out." And I was what, 16, and we went into London and we went to this workshop, and a producer came up to me. I didn't know he was a producer in that moment, and he said, "What's your name?" And I said, "My name's Jack Ryder." And he said, "That's a great stage name." And I said, "What's a stage name?" You know, no idea. And that led on to me being brought in to do an audition for Jamie Mitchell, and the rest is history. That's how it happened. So it really was. If it hadn't have been for my friend, who did end up going into the show as well, he did about 2 episodes, I think. But if it hadn't been for that call, I would have been, God knows where I'd be now. Do you know what I mean? But it was a real chance lottery moment for
I
me.
mean, a show like that kind of, I imagine, it changes your life, like I said before. But, you were in, like you said, one of the most iconic families on the show, and you did get some really iconic storylines. I mean, obviously, the exit was probably, I would say, one of your most iconic and memorable. But for you, what did you take away from your time on the show? What were kind of your highlights of the show?
Um, do you know what? In all honesty, it's mixed, because part of it is a bit of a blur. It really is. Part of it is a real blur. Because just the workload and the repetition of it and how swift the show moves, in terms of how many scenes you're doing a day. And I think I had like the record number of episodes for a character in 3 years in a row. Because the thing is with Jamie Mitchell is he never really had his own story. He was always part of big storylines. So he was all part of the Jacksons and he was part of the Mitchells and the whole Steve Owen thing, and working with Craig Fairbrass for a while, and so I was always behind those gates at L Street, 5 to 6 days a week. So I didn't have a life really outside of that. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I think with all the jobs I've done, whether that be theatre, TV, or film, whatever, like it's the people. I think it's like in anything in life, in any job you do, it's the people that sort of matter. And I think obviously being really sort of, Steve McFadden taking me under his wing and working with Barbara, who was like, she was like my nan, in the show, and she was wonderful to be around. In my relationship with Natalie Cassidy and Dean Gaffney, and a lot of laughs. And the thing is, back then as well, like I remember just like one of my big flashbacks, and just like the tone of it, the energy of it is me, Sean Williamson, Michael Greco, Natalie standing on the lot outside the Vic, and with nothing to do. And we just used to tell stories and make up skits and take the mick out of each other, and because there was no phone, we had phones, but there was none of that mobile thing, there was no social media, there was none of that. So, and that's what really shocked me when I went on to do Holby 10, 15 years later, or whatever it was. And I really noticed between the takes and stuff, like everyone just went into a room and everyone's like this. Do you know what I mean? And so back in the EastEnders days, like everyone just, it was just brilliant fun and relationships and communication. And everyone was very present. And there were some great characters in terms of, not the characters in the show, but actually the actors themselves, like people like Sean and Michael, and and Steve was always looking out for me, and really looked out for me and took me under his wing. And so I was all that was extremely sort of palpable at the time. And yeah, I'll never forget those sorts of just those relationships at that time. Yeah.
And obviously, when it came time for your character to be killed off, was it your decision to leave, or was that kind of taken out of your hands a bit? I mean, how did that come about, and that amazing storyline as well?
It was my decision to leave, but it wasn't my decision to leave like a dead end vibe. Do you know what I mean? I kind of just wanted some time off. I was in a relationship with Kim Marsh, and she had two children, and that for me was a kind of real solace at that time in terms of the chaos of EastEnders and the chaos of the fame and the whole heartthrob thing. Coming home to these two kids, 3 and 6 at the time, David and Emily were, was just such a breath of fresh air, and I just wanted a bit more of that at that time because I'd done it for 5 years at that point, and I just wanted to get some clarity, and I just wanted to just take a step back. I think that's what I wanted to do because, like I say, I was always in the studio, and I don't think EastEnders liked that. And I think they were I think their sort of idea on this thing was well, you can't do that. Do you know what I mean? Because you're such an integral part, and Jamie would never leave Sonia, and all that sort of stuff. And it was like, and I just felt really stuck. And I think that was the moment when I said, you know, well, what if I left for a while, And they said, well, we would have to kill you off. And it was like, and it just got to that stage where it was like, I'm just sort of stuck here. And if you're gonna kill him off, then you're gonna kill him off. That's what it's gonna be. So I felt very unfortunate about that was the way it sort of ended. But it was a clean break. It was a great storyline. Um, and for me as an actor, and for me growing and sort of evolving from that point on, there was never a kind of a way back. Do you know what I mean? So I had to move on, and I had to generate other work and get on with my life, and there was no kind of door there anymore. And I think that was actually, looking back at this point, I think that was actually a really positive thing for me as an actor, to sort of not have to rely on that kind of cushion, that I could actually had to I had to get on and grind and make things happen, which
Do
is
you, do you
yeah.
think if that door hadn't have been closed, that would have been something that you would have been tempted to go back if
I
asked?
Looking back, I think there were certain periods over the last 20, 25 years, or whatever it's been now. There were definitely moments when I would have gone back. Yeah, definitely lulls and quiet periods where it would have been like, this would be really handy, actually. Do you know what I mean? But that was never an option. So you have to dig deep, and you have to pull something out of the bag, and that's good character building. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I was imagine as well you had to deal with was that high level of fame at quite a young age. I mean, did you find that hard, or did you have a way of managing it?
Again, I don't think it's really in your consciousness too much. Like I said, there's a lot of fog there for me in terms of that side of things. I don't think anyone finds that easy to cope with. And again, no disrespect to the BBC or EastEnders, but I didn't have that sort of support at that time, in the sense that, like, I'd go to the Smash Hits Awards, and there'd be like S Club 7, and there'd be, sort of Westlife and all these guys, and they had security, and they had managers, and they were a group, and I would arrive at this thing like by myself, and I wouldn't have any sense of sort of support, or sort of, I mean, they had the press team and stuff at EastEnders, but again, it was like, I don't know. I did feel on my own with it. I did feel very separate from the cast in that sense of, and people have said to me, actors who I worked on the show years and years later, they always say to me, like, it was so, we used to really feel for you because you were like a pop star, you know, and it was that level of fame that was very tricky, and like going into shops and walking down a high street, what was impossible. And I sort of forget about all that now, but my brother and people I'm close with and close friends who I've known for many, many years remind me at times of moments and stories, and I go, wow, really? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because for me, I think I must have just zoned out of that because it was hard to cope with. But I'm quite a, I'm not a sort of, I'm quite an introvert. I'm quite a quiet guy, really. I'm happy in my own company. So, for me, I was never part of the nightlife. I was never part of, going to the clubs and going out and sort of seeking any of that. So I would finish work and I'd go home and play Pro Evolution Soccer, or like yourself, I had a huge DVD collection. I'd go back and just watch box sets, and then my mates would be over, we'd order pizza, and it was like a Friends episode, at my place. There's lots of laughs and funny people around. But it was never the red carpets and the nightlife thing. I've never been into that. So it was behind those gates. I was completely secure and safe and happy with the cast and the crew. And then I'd jump in my car and I'd go home and I'd be with my friends and my family, and that's how it ran really.
Now, I mean, I just wanted to briefly mention because obviously, some of your, former co-stars doing super well. Steve McFadden obviously winning awards, which are long overdue for his amazing performances. And also, we've seen Natalie Cassidy has kind of stepped away from EastEnders now and kind of going on to bigger and better things. So, as a sort of a fellow actor and someone who, you've worked with these people, you must be super proud to see them doing so well.
Yeah, no, I sort of follow Chris Clenshaw, who's obviously he's left EastEnders now, I believe. He produced me on Holby, and so when he puts little stories up and things, like it comes up about Steve and the awards and things, and I think the show's doing incredibly well. And like I don't really follow the show. I never watched the show when I was in it. It was a job, like any job I do. Um, but no, I'm really happy that the show seems to have it's kind of back on its feet in a way, kind of being celebrated really. And even some people I talk to, they go, "Oh, I'm watching the show again. It's amazing," and all this sort of stuff. So that feels great. And Steve, he's phenomenal. His dedication, his ability, his focus, and to do it for so long, and still be, producing the work he does. I've always been an admirer of Steve, and I think he's a wonderful actor. So anything that he wins, I fully support that. And Natalie is just fantastic, and yeah, I hope she's happy and she's going on to great things. I mean, again, we're not really in touch a lot, but there might be the odd message or the odd text here and there. A year goes by or whatever. But no, if those guys are doing well, and I see little snippets. I'm not on social media that much. I am the sessions, but not personally. No, I'm very happy for them. Yeah.
Now, obviously, the other thing that you've been doing, like you mentioned earlier, is you've been directing and kind of working behind the cameras, and I believe you were working on one of Gary Barlow's musicals. So that must be kind of quite fun to get to see it from the other side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really challenging actually. I got the wonderful opportunity to direct my first show when I was probably in my late 20s, which was Calendar Girls, written by Tim Firth and produced by David Pugh and Davith Rogers, who they really took me under their wing and gave me a lot of opportunities in the directing capacity. West End, and we traveled the world, and I was involved in lots of different projects. And yeah, sort of taking on that directing thing, it was really challenging, but I really relished it, and I think it really sort of informed me more as an actor. And talking about the sessions and me sort of coaching and nurturing actors from all walks of life and at all different places in their careers. A lot of what I give over came from my lessons as a director, not necessarily as an actor. I mean, I know a lot as an actor and I've had a lot of experience, but in terms of sort of the casting side of things and being on sets and being on stage, and how you develop yourself as an actor and what you bring to the table, all of that stuff, my voice and my angle and that always comes from a directing capacity rather than an actor. But no, I loved it, and I directed the History Boys and obviously the band, the Take That musical. Very challenging, but very rewarding. And those nights when you're standing at the back of the circle in a huge theatre, full house, and the audience is going crazy, and the laughs are landing, and there's a standing ovation, like you can walk off into the night and your job's done, and it feels wonderful. And I think for a long period, and probably even now, like I feel certainly in the theatre world, I feel a lot more comfortable off the stage than on it. Do you know what I mean? I think in television and film, I'm still very sort of happy being in front of the camera. But yeah, with the theatre, the directing was wonderful. And I did a few TV things as well, but theatre was mainly my source. Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously, having done both now, are you hoping that that will continue, that you can do both, or would you rather kind of one took over more than the other?
I don't really have a preference. I mean, actors, we're like fruit pickers, we go where the work is, it's and opportunities come and you get a feeling for the script, you get a feeling for the creative team, and it works or it doesn't, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm a working actor. I'm not an actor who gets scripts sent to me and I get lots of choices. I'm a working actor like anyone else. So, when the work comes, if it's I'm not choosy, but it's got to be right. It's got to be for the right character. It's the communication with the director and all of that sort of building, all those building blocks has to sort of feel good. And so yeah, I'm just open. I've worn a lot of hats, in terms of directing, acting, writing, and all that stuff. So for me, it's a kind of an open road, and I'm always sort of open to conversations and open to things, and we'll just see where the horizon leads me.
What would you say is the proudest thing you've done in your sort of professional career? What would you say is the thing that you look back at with most fondness and think that was me at my best, or what I enjoyed the most?
Think what it might have even been when I directed the History Boys. That was a show I was given. Real tragic thing of, I think, a director who was originally signed got sick and passed away, and then I got contacted by the producing team, and they said, "Would you come and have a meeting about directing the History Boys?" And I suddenly had that sort of inferior complex of Alan Bennett. Like, I'm not the guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't educated at Cambridge. I don't know a thing, and I went and I met these guys, and they were great, and they asked me to do it, and I think for the first time, it was kind of all on me, in terms of, before I've had a lot of sort of help and guidance and support. And not that this team didn't do that, but it felt like creatively and artistically, I had full reign on what this show was going to be and how it was going to happen. And and yeah, watching that show, and hearing some of the comments from people at the theatre, and saying that this is the best thing they'd seen in years, and the group of lads who did the show, and how that all sort of evolved and manifested during the sort of rehearsal period, and that was really wonderful. And I remember getting the train back to London, once the show was up and running, and feeling extremely proud of having really taken that on from every angle, and done a stellar job on that. And that felt great. I mean, there's been lots of moments, but it's got nothing to do with sort of acting rewards, or award shows like that stuff. Again, it's all a bit of a blur. But artistically, I think the History Boys, that I felt very proud of that show.
And I mean, going forward, what would be the dream? What's the either the role or the show or the production? What would you love to do going forward?
For me, I just want to work with good people, And when I say good people, I mean nice people. It doesn't have to be some big blockbuster thing. It doesn't have to be a soap, or a successful series. I mean, success, it's a funny thing. From the outside, people could look at me and go, "Yeah, you've had success." And if they asked me that question of, "Did success make you happy?" I would say, "I don't think it did make me happy." That's not to say that I never want success again. It's fine. But for me, it's more about the sort of the artistic journey and the relationships, as I was touching on before. And even over the last year, I've linked up with a few directors who are making independent films, and I've played a few different characters in these things, and we've had a ball, and I would do that. I would do that all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because of just the nature of the people that you're around. So I just want to work with nice people. I just want to work with good people, and obviously the sessions is very important to me. And this is really, a thing, like, and this is very true. Like, when I get more satisfaction from a client texting me or emailing me saying, "Oh my God, thank you so much, I got the part." I get more from that than getting a part myself. I really do. And I think when you can pass it on in that sense, and you're around sort of people who are hungry, and want to work hard and want to achieve. If I can be a part of that nurturing process and get them to a place where they're on the red carpet, they're getting all the lights and the flashes and the thing that they desire. I love being in the shadows and being a part of that. I love that aspect of it. So for me, it's just, I'm not trying to sort of put myself into any place where I want a certain role, or in a certain thing. It's just, I just want to work with good people.
Now, obviously, we are going out on Hospital Radio Reading, and patients and staff will be sort of watching and listening. What would you love to say to any of the amazing NHS staff that are listening, or to any of the patients that are stuck in hospital, maybe not having the best time at the moment? What
Uh,
would you like to say to them?
oh God, that's a question, isn't it? I've never spent much time in hospitals, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, God, that's thrown me. What would I say? I mean, God, thank you to, God, I admire any person who works day to day in a hospital and the grind and the reality of all that, like that they got more mental muscle than I have. Do you know what I mean? That's very amazing and yeah, all my goodwill and faith is in that. But yeah, to the patients, it's I don't know. I think it's that thing of I can imagine any patient now with their mobile phone and their YouTube and their Instagram and their iPads and just scrolling endlessly through things. And I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I was in that situation. I guess, do I want to say to the patients like read a book? Do I want to say to the patient learn a language? Do you know what I mean? Like, but I hope there's some light, for them and calm, I know that hospitals are quite bleak and they're quite hard and sterile and all that sort of stuff. It's like it's very difficult. But yeah, just I guess just sending love and hope they're all okay, the patients. Yeah. Hope they're gonna pull through good, you know.
Now, I just want to say, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time and
You're
for
very
talking to
welcome.
me. You're welcome back anytime. And yeah, keep safe.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you for your time.